it has not, whether you're a guitar player or you're in the outdoors, like there's always more to learn to get better. You see these people that you're like, there's this guitar player who plays in this band called Animals as Leaders, and I watch him play, and my mind is just absolutely blown. But like every other video of his is like him talking like excitedly about like this new technique he learned. Yep. And how he's been like practicing. Like, if a guy like you is like a perpetual learner, always practicing, like, dude, we should never not be that way. We should always be trying to just learn more. And you can learn. There's always things you can learn. There's something you can learn from someone who's 20 years younger than you. There's something you can learn from someone who's 20 years older than you. There's always new things, and that's when it comes to the outdoors, like especially.
I don't know about you, but I always carry a knife. It doesn't matter what the situation is, I'm always reaching for a blade. Whether I'm out hunting in the backwoods, fishing on lakes and rivers, or simply cutting rope at camp. And when I need a tool, I want something that's quality, durable, and handmade right here in the USA. I know that's something you're looking for as well, so go to maloneknives.com and get yourself something that's going to last and look damn good too. This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. We're here at the end of the year, and as always, I like to welcome back my very good friend, the one and only James Appleton, host of the 46 of 46 podcast. James, how's your year been, man?
Hello, Paul. It's always a pleasure to come and talk to you about the outdoors on this podcast. I listen to every episode that you put out. I appreciate what you do. I don't think there's anybody, and I mean this genuinely, I don't think there's anybody who is as authentically passionate about the outdoors as you are. In any podcast that I listen to, and I listen to a lot of different outdoor shows, but you have a like a lovable quality about what you do, and your love for the outdoors is honestly, it's like very childlike. It's very pure, and you're just obsessed with it. And like you're the type that you see a lot of, parents. I have kids. Like as soon as you start talking about your kids, a lot of times you smile without realizing it, and you're the same way about the outdoors. And I notice it, and that's why I love listening to your show. So I'm always happy to come back.
Well, thank you for that.
I mean it too. I'm not just bullshitting. I mean it.
Well, it goes both ways. I mean, you are very passionate about what you do too, and we're kind of like on this similar. I think the reason we get along so well is we're on this similar learning path all at the same time, and we're constantly like, you and I talk a lot, and we're constantly like, oh, I did this today. Oh, I did this today. Oh, I did this today. But it's like, well, in my mind, I'm like, well, shit, James is out there. I got to get out there too. And then like we just kind of like continually reinforce how
I feel
hard
the same
we're
way.
going. And it's fun. I love that.
Well, no, I appreciate that about our friendship. It's like I always know that you're out there doing something, and you're always doing something new. And yeah, I kind of riff off you the same way. And that's the type of circle that I want in my life at this point. Yeah. And I feel like anybody who has friends who encourage them to be outside more and doing new things, like that's the type of circle anybody should be in. And when it comes to the outdoors, like there's never, we'll talk about it obviously today, but you'll never do everything. So there's always new things to do. And that's why being outside in the woods is just so awesome.
Well,
and talking about it. Why not?
Yeah. Speaking of, new things, you are kind of well known as this outdoors hiker personality, especially in the, 46 high peaks out there in the Adirondacks. And it's funny because you don't talk about it as much on your podcast as I do about like hunting and fishing and like just generally exploring all the options of the outdoors, but you're right up there. You're doing all of this stuff all the time. Like you are an avid hunter. You are like this year I watched you get into fishing pretty hard, which is awesome because I did the same thing. And you're gearing up for some ice fishing, which is that going to be your first time ice fishing?
No, I went I've been a couple times in the past, but it will be my first time like actually ice fishing. I've gone ice fishing, but this will be my first season ice fishing, if that makes sense. Like actually pursuing it more than just like, hey, you want to go ice fishing today? Yeah, sure. It'll be a lot more consistent, basically. So yeah, we'll call it that.
I love ice. I'm just sitting here having like anxiety because this week has been like below freezing, like 1 degree during Christmas and stuff. And then next week, it's supposed to be like, there's supposed to be a day of like 50-degree temps here, which is like so demoralizing when you're gearing up to go ice fishing. And I was just having this talk with my buddy today. He's like panicking because we rented this cabin in like 3 weeks to go ice fishing. And he's like, the temperatures, I'm like, dude, he's very new to the outdoors. And I'm like, dude, you can't fight nature, man. That's how it is. And
that's exactly how it is. It's the same way here too right now. I mean, this week, and I'm in the Adirondack Mountains, so it's, right now it's like 17 degrees. This is normal, but it's going to be in the 40s later this week. And it's like, I actually had the same conversation like 2 hours ago with my buddy who I was lifting with, because we're like, so I guess we're not going to be ice fishing next week because it's going to be like 4 days in a row of 40, 50-degree temperatures. Like, what is this? So I'm actually dealing with the exact same thing as you guys are. Fortunately, I didn't rent something, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like the outdoors, dude, it does not care about you. It does not care about your plans. It's going to do what it does, and you got to work around it. And you guys you can still go fishing, but you'll be on the shore. But also at the same time, you could be very surprised. Like it's going to be warm, but who knows? You could still it could still freeze over where you are. You never know. Yeah. So but fortunately, I don't have any money planned, and possibly ruined by these warm temperatures. And yeah, it's really bizarre to see temperatures in the 40s and 50 for God's sake where I live in January. It's unheard of. Yeah, but whatever.
It's wild. Well, speaking of, in light of recent tragedies, someone just died up by you in, I think it was in the Adirondacks, and someone else just died winter hiking. And you just put out a series of hiking podcasts, 3, I believe, where it was like back to back, what you need to know for backpacking and hiking in the winter, which I thought was very helpful. A lot of stuff in there is very useful for new people because it's not the same ball game. Like even when I went up with you a few years ago, you took me up on Hurricane Mountain in the middle of winter, and I mean, we're talking feet of snow. Mm-hmm. So why did you feel that you needed to put out these episodes other than purely like sharing knowledge? I mean, it's pretty obvious how you say the mountains don't give a crap about you. Like they are indifferent to your life or death, and I think that's something people really need to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I say that a lot on my podcast, and I've had people tell me to put it on a bumper sticker or a shirt or whatever because I say it so often. But I mean, we live in this world today where everyone is so damn gung-ho about people's feelings, and it's just like all that matters. And it's just like, that is so stupid when it comes to something like the outdoors it doesn't have to just be the outdoors. It could be, heart disease. It could be all these different things. It's like we are being fed information that's false. Yeah. And these things don't care about you. So like health is important, or like when it comes to the outdoors, being prepared is important. And basically I decided, because my podcast started as a hiking podcast just kind of naturally. And then, it's evolved from there into much more of the outdoors, but because I like doing other things than just hike as well, as do most people. But yeah, so I decided based upon, so this girl, Emily Sotelo from Massachusetts, she died in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, I guess a month ago at this point, just going out unprepared, and she froze to death. I mean, that's what happened. And then it happened again, just yesterday. What day is today? The 26th. It happened Christmas Eve into Christmas Day again in the White Mountains. Someone else, unprepared, didn't have any of the right equipment, and then they found him, and froze to death. And there's already been an uptick in rescues here where I live in the Adirondacks this winter, and it's like winter just started. I mean, in the mountains, winter started like a month and a half ago, but there's already been just so many rescues, and it's just like, what is going on? So long-winded answer, but I decided I'm going to take my podcast, which always talks about hiking, or not always, but often talks about hiking. And I was going to just make a, kind of a winter hiking 101 episode in light of these tragedies that keep happening, because it's fun to go out into the snow in the winter time and climb a mountain in the winter because it's a totally different ball game. But with that, it comes a totally different ball game. It's not the same. I always say winter hiking's not for everyone. It is only for people who are willing to do what you need to do to have the gear you need. The gear is expensive. It's an expensive hobby, but so be it. Again, the mountains don't care about you. Look what happens. You try to go out and thinking you'll be all right, and you could die, literally. And it happens, and it keeps happening. So I made this, what was going to be just one episode about Winter Hiking 101. And as I started writing and getting all the information, it was like, this is not able to be told in one episode. So what was supposed to be a quick episode turned into a 3-parter. But I'm actually pretty pleased with them. I'm very happy with them. Happy it exists. It is by no means, like an Adirondack specific series. It applies whether you're out in Colorado, Washington, Tennessee, Ohio, New York, doesn't matter. It's just general winter hiking 101. And I broke it down as specific as I could possibly be. So if you want to try, getting into the outdoors in the winter, it's a good place to start those 3 episodes. The first episode, I go through everything that goes on your body, starting with base layers all the way to coat, hat, snowshoes. And then the second episode was everything that should be in your backpack. And then I also get into the actual winter hiking experience so you can see how everything I've been talking about looks in real time, like on a virtual hike via the podcast, layering, taking layers off, putting layers on. Oh, now we got to put the snowshoes on. Oh, now we got to, stop and let ourselves relax a little bit from sweating, we got to change a layer, like that sort of thing, to like see it in action. And by see, I mean here, because it's a podcast. And then the third episode was all emergencies. So hypothermia, avalanches, avalanche safety, frostbite, what to do if you get caught out there and you have to spend the night out there. So the more I dove into doing this episode, the more I realized like there is so much information to know to be successful out there. And someone like myself who goes out all the time and has for years, it's just like it's just what you do. It's second nature, but it's not surprising once I started to break it down to realize like, wow, there really is a lot of information that you learn, and I've just learned it over time from going out there and doing it with people who have done it longer than me, and then, asking questions or a little bit of research, and you just learn through experience. But if you're going from zero to get out there, it turns out there's actually a crap load of information to know. So yeah, I put this series out, which is pretty stoked on it. Not stoked on like anything I did. I'm just stoked that like all the information to get you started is in one easy spot. And as a linear person who learns very linearly, it's applicable to me because it's how I learned. So it's how I made the episode, but it's just very start at the beginning and take you through it to, by the end of the 3 episodes, you are actually ready. You're a lot more knowledgeable to go out there into the woods and to climb a mountain and get back home safely. And without that information, that's when tragedies strike. And it just sucks so bad that these things keep happening. And we're 4 days into the technical winter season right now too. So 5 days, 6 days. Yeah, it's a tragedy, and it's tragedies that can be avoided. But again, the information needs to be brought forth to light that this is serious business. In the summertime, yeah, you want to go for a hike, grab your shoes, a pair of socks, and a water bottle, and you can go and just be fine. The winter, completely different animal, not the same, and should be treated as such.
Well, you touched on it briefly, but I think one of the things that people underestimate most with winter hiking is they're so concerned about being warm, they often don't take into account the opposite factor, which is you get soaking wet because you're working so hard. Your body's still sweating profusely, but they're not taking off layers. And then when those outer layers that are meant to keep you warm when you're not moving or something get wet, that's when you get in trouble. I feel like that's the biggest thing people don't think about, especially if they're new, because they're so concerned about staying warm. It's like when you and I hiked up Hurricane Mountain, I was literally in a base layer. I almost took off my shirt because I was getting so hot. And then by the time you're up on the top of the mountain, the conditions are so insane. We had to stand there for 10, 15 minutes, cool down before we went up there and put layers back on. And I think a lot of people don't think about that. And that's when you get cold, it's over. When you're frozen cold, that's the game over unless you can keep moving.
Well, the real thing when it's over, it's game over when you get wet.
Yeah,
and people think I have to keep I have to keep the elements off of me. And it's like, yes, that is true. You do. But by doing so, we all know what happens when we wear a damn rain jacket. It's like, oh, it's raining outside. Do I want to be wet from the outside or do I want to be wet from the inside? Because I'll be sweating so freaking much. And that's what happens. So, yeah, you're really correct. It's like when people are going into the woods they don't have the experience. And again, the best way to get experience is to go do it. Start small, do small hikes, learn as you go where you're not going to put yourself in really bad conditions. And over time, you'll dial in the layering needs that you have. You'll dial in which gear worked well for you, which didn't work well. And when you only go a mile or two into the woods on maybe a flat trail or a very small mountain, it's like, even if something goes terribly wrong, you'll likely be okay to get out of the woods. That's not completely always the case, but when you start small, you can figure these things out. But when you go into it, you're thinking like, I need to have all these layers on to be warm, and it's exactly correct. Then you start walking, you're like, wow, I'm already sweating. We haven't even started climbing the mountain yet, and then you end up getting wet from the inside, and you set yourself up for pain and misery and potentially worse. So yeah, when we went hiking, it was a nasty day too, because there was, I remember being like, not embarrassed, but just like, I was disappointed. I was like, oh, come on, Adirondacks, he's here to see your beauty here. And it's just like crazy snowy and cloudy and stuff. But fortunately we had some views, but you get so used to this concept of staying warm that I'm always hiking in the wintertime in just the base layer top. Like that's what I wear because I sweat like crazy. Mm-hmm. And I even have a mid layer that I have the back cut off of it. So like those like kind of colder days where, it might be in the teens and, you should always be bold and start cold. You want to be cold when you're at the trailhead so that when you start moving, you're going to warm up just like when you work out and you exercise. But I have like the back cut off of some base layer or some, not base layers, mid layers so that I can be like slightly warmer without that sweat that comes from my back. But it's the winter is just a different beast. And I just want people to realize that so that they can be out there and experience it. Because when you do realize it and you're prepared accordingly, it's freaking awesome. Yeah. I mean, the woods are awesome, but man, when they're covered in snow and it's oh man, it's just so much, it's even better. It's even better, even though it's different. So that's why, I just want people to be ready for the elements. So,
yeah. Well, on the flip side of things, a conversation that you and I have quite often is like, it's hard to say it in context, I guess, when we're talking about this specifically, but like I think what the core of what we talk about so often is like the gear that people obsess about isn't as important as knowing how to use it and or how to like do a skill versus just buying stuff and hoping for the best. So I think that's something that you and I talk about so often because like, in my opinion, which is worth whatever, a base layer is a base layer. You can buy a $300 base layer or you can buy a $20 base layer or you can buy a mid-weight, whatever you want to say. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't. I think it's this cycle of like name brand. You have to be the coolest looking guy out on the trail, and that's the only way people are going to respect you. And it's also bullshit. I remember when I went hiking with you, you had this like really badass Osprey pack on, and you're like, I'll never buy one of these again. You said you're like, I'll never buy an expensive pack again because what happens to them? They get shredded.
They just get torn the hell up out there, and just it's like, oh, now this zipper's broken, or this, like the elastic like compartments that are awesome before they're ripped. Oh, but they rip the damn first time you take them out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't. Backpacks should not be that expensive. They shouldn't. Yeah, they're not the most expensive thing you should own, but most people they are because you kind of think of them as your kind of like your. It's like the motherboard, the mothership of your experience in the outdoors. But yeah, they get beat to hell.
Well,
Mine do definitely, at least.
Yeah. I mean, if you use things, they should get beat up. That's why people are like, I can't believe you're taking your nice camera out on this trip. I was like, well, I didn't buy it to not use it. That is the whole purpose of having the camera is to use the camera. It's not to like sit at home and look cool. I don't care about that. So what do you think this obsession with gear. And I see it's very prevalent in both the backpacking, hiking, and hunting worlds especially. There's just this freaking obsession of people that are just like, oh, I got to have the latest, greatest thing when I already have 1,000 of them. But I have to buy this new brand, this new piece of equipment for this specific thing, or this newest bow, or this newest whatever, foot warmer, whatever the shit comes out every other day. Where do you think this obsession comes from? Because we talk about it a lot, but I don't think we ever like got to the main reason of why we think this happens. Is it just like the way society is, or is it just people trying to look cool on the internet? I don't know. I've never figured it out.
Ding, 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 ding. I think that, I mean, personally, I do think that there's a huge image. There's an aesthetic that people want, whether it's, you know, it's in the hiking world, the backpacking world, or definitely the hunting world. There is this like image that I want people to see of me. So if I don't have all this expensive, new, whatever's hip thing. And again, that's not like, it's not necessarily a outdoors type of problem. It is definitely just like the norm in society is to present this image.
Keeping up with the Kardashians or whatever the hell it is.
That's it. I mean, you know, like the phrase keeping up with the Joneses, like it's literally that exact concept. Dude, it drives me bonkers because it's like you see these people with, you know, hey, look, I got all this new camo this year, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, what'd you use last year? What'd you use the year before? Why does that not work anymore? You post these videos every year of new camo, but it's like, well, what was wrong with last year's? Or, you know, you got this, you got that, you know, or when it comes to the backpacking world. I mean, the hunting world and the backpacking world have a lot of crossover, but there's also a lot of differences too. I feel like that vibe, that like have to have the newest camo and whatever's trendy right now, if you replace that, you replace trendy camo with ultralight, now you hit the backpacking world. So it's like the same thing. I want the street cred. I want those, you know, those points for, you know, my credibility. But if you replace that with like ultralight stuff, or, you know, for me, I'm just, you know, when it comes to hunting, I buy Cabela's brand camo. It's cheaper. It's the same material. It works. Or if it comes to backpacking or hiking or just general outdoor stuff, I'm not buying North Face and Patagonia. I'm buying EMS's brand stuff, Eastern Mountain Sports, which is, you know, like an REI of the Northeast. But like, or like if I had an REI, maybe I'd go there. But like, I'm buying their stuff because it is the same stuff. It still works. It's more affordable. And I just don't care about this credibility. I just want stuff that works. Does this work? Yep. All right, let's go. That's the question I have. Does it work? Yep. Okay, cool. But yes, I do feel that there's unfortunately an image, and obviously we're not stupid. Social media is 95% to blame, because if the only people you ever saw you were like the handful of people you crossed outdoors that day on the trail, who cares? No, 4 people that you see are going to know about your new lightweight backpack or your new, you know, this or that. And obviously there is uses, there is time to purchase new stuff, but I would dare say it's a bit out of hand from what I see, from just as a viewer in the background who doesn't typically partake. I buy when I need to, and it pains me to buy. But I'm also not a gear nut, and you know that about me. I'm not a gear guy, and does it work? Yes. Okay. Here we go. I want to get out there. So, and I know you're the same way. I mean, like, you see the guitars on your wall there. Even when it comes to music, same thing for me. Like, I've never been a gear nerd. I have lots of guitars, and it's like, do these work? Yep. All right, let's go. How's the distortion on the amp? Great. All right, cool. Let's go. So I do think part of that is probably our kind of just general mentality towards anything. But when it comes to the image and the aesthetic, that is 1,000%, in my opinion, what causes this to be so prevalent. And I'm sure people listening probably agree or disagree, but that's fine.
Yeah. You don't have to agree with me. That's totally fine. Well, and we were talking about this the other day too. I think like my band's on a record label, and you know, it's a decently sized record label, and all of the albums we've put out are recorded right here in this room where I'm recording this episode. And all the other bands are paying like $10,000, $15,000 to record an album in a studio. I'm like, but at the end of the day, we're all coming out on the same record label, and they're putting the same amount of marketing money into it, and they're doing all the same stuff. We've shot all of our music videos ourselves. Now we're shooting music videos for other bands because they're like, oh, who shot this? And we're like, we did. And I just think something that you and I talked about too a lot is resilience. Like we just have this resilient attitude, like shit needs to get done. I'm going to do it. That doesn't mean I need to go spend $20,000 on something. It means I'll just make it happen with what I got laying around. And it seems to be working out well. You know, like
Sure.
I don't hear people complaining about it. Like this doesn't sound as good. They're like, the average person can't tell the difference. You know what I mean? So it translates into the outdoors world too. Like there's dudes out there just decimating deer every year, and they're probably using a bow they bought 20 years ago, like some old compound bow and a gun that they've had for 2 decades. Yeah. What's the difference between the guy who does the same thing with a $5,000 rifle versus the guy who did it with his grandpa's, 12 gauge? There's no difference. It's just one guy looks cooler.
The difference is the social media points that they get. When it comes to music too, I mean, obviously we're talking the outdoors. When it comes to music, you're going to be using the same samples that person at $15,000, $20,000 album is using too. So it will actually be the same product at the end of the day. But it's just being resourceful and just doing things yourself. And it's like anything. No one's going to do as good a job for anything you're needing to do than you are. No one's going to put the same love into it that you're going to put into it. Yeah, I always, we talk about this every so often, but like when it comes, like you're talking about with the dude, the dude who's probably using a bow, it's 20 years old. Imagine how many just badasses out there in the hunting world that you've never heard of. They could not care less about social media, how much, oh my God, the knowledge and wisdom and experience that these guys have, that they'll share it with you all day long if you have a conversation with them, but they're not going to find themselves on social media playing the social media game. Like, man, there's some serious people out there. Like, for example, up here where I live, there is a dude, he is in his 80s and he has done like, I think he's in his 80s and he's done over 80 rounds of the 46 high peaks. Wow. And this, it's like, dude, he's in his 80s. Think he gives a damn about social media? No, but man, like the amount of knowledge and experience and expertise and understanding of these mountains that dude has, those are the types of people that I want to be around. Like the social media social media sucks, but we all know that. We all feel the same way, whether you have 1 million followers or a few followers. I think collectively as a society, we actually understand and we're openly admitting the downfall that it does present our society. But yeah, those people you just have never heard of, man, those guys have some stories to tell. And that's where, like what you said earlier, where it's like this, having the experience is ultimately what matters. And those are the types of people that I want to talk to personally.
Yeah. Well, dude, speaking of that, we do talk about that all the time. Like every time we start, like we'll talk about stuff, be like, man, this sucks. Why is this happening? Why is this way? And then we'll be like, dude, remember, there's like some dude out there who's like an absolute monster that nobody knows exists. And I think that's the coolest thing ever. And it's like, I've met those people. I went, upland hunting this year. And I mean, everybody's on social media, but I was out hunting with these 2 dudes, absolute snipers, slayers. They were like limiting every day we were out there pretty much. And they do not care if anybody knows. They just love going out there. And they're killing like 5 to 1 birds of everybody else because they're just that skilled and good. And it's just like, these are the guys that are out here that I want to meet because they're absolute badasses and they're like masters of their craft, but they don't care if you know or not because they're out there for them. And that's
absolutely.
Sweet.
It is sweet. So and I give, it's like, we obviously know like some people have been able to utilize the outdoors in a way and create a business for themselves, and like all, more power to you. That's great that if you're able to make it work and, you're making money from this whole kind of vibe of social media and the outdoors. But those people that you're talking about, that you're hunting with, like those are the people that are just like, it doesn't matter who's watching. They're going to do the same thing no matter what, whether, and that is, there's something to be said about that. And I when you just, nothing changes based on anyone that's watching you, that's the authenticity. And again, I think I think social media just, again, in society, it's weird that this episode's becoming like a anti-social media thing, but it has definitely hurt the authenticity of what the outdoors is in any whether it's fishing, hunting, backpacking, it doesn't matter, rock climbing. Like there is an authenticity level that people who know, and people who don't know are fooled by certain people. And that's, that is what is. For example, there's a friend of mine named Todd who is an absolute, like you're saying, he is an absolute savage. He gets it done every year here in the big woods in the Adirondacks. Every year, he's got a wall just filled with mature backcountry Adirondack bucks. And he's also a professional archer, but you wouldn't know any of these things without talking to him, because he just like doesn't do the social media thing. But he's also an outdoors writer. And we were talking actually just a few weeks ago, and he was talking to me about, he goes, the thing about me, it's like, I don't know this, I just do kind of what I do, but I've been doing this a long time, and I can really quickly tell if you're a writer who is also a hunter, or if you're a hunter who is also a writer. And he says, and I only want to read the writing from the people who are hunters first and writers second, as opposed to being a writer first who decides to write about hunting. Like he said, you can just tell. And I hope to one day be the type of person where I am on that I am that category, or someone like himself sees in me and things that I'm doing that I am just the genuine person who is just needs to be out there, doesn't matter who's watching first, and then the other things second. Because, there, again, authenticity in the outdoors is lacking. But, I don't know how else to do it, how else to get there other than just like maybe take it with a grain of salt, the people you follow on social media or what they say or what anyone does. I mean, obviously, do whatever you want, but there is definitely sadly a lack of authenticity but at the same time, who knows? Maybe this whole social media thing gets more people exposed to the outdoors. It definitely does. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's a benefit to it. Maybe we're just a bunch of assholes who don't get down with it as much as certain other people do. Who knows?
Yeah.
I was asked recently, what does the outdoors mean to you? To me, the outdoors is everything. It's like the growth model that consumes the entrepreneur, or the unending drive that pushes the athlete to outperform the competition. It's the greatest teacher of life lessons, whether it be learning to accept that most things are out of your control, or that the trees, the rivers, the mountains move along whether you're there or not. It's the motivator that keeps me accountable to my physical and mental health, because if I don't have the strength and conditioning to do the things that I enjoy outdoors, whether they be hunting, fishing, backpacking, adventure racing, or tackling some long-distance adventures, then everything becomes exponentially more difficult. Most importantly, the outdoors allows me to be, to think, to exist in the same plane that the majority of the natural world still exists in, to break the bonds from what we call civilization. The outdoors is freedom, a place where life and death are one and the same. The prime example of what it means to exist. In my mind, there's no separation. The outdoors simply is, as all things should be, perfection in its most chaotic form. The outdoors is you, it's me, it's all of us.
I just think, I don't know, I always feel like I'm so far behind the ball because I didn't start doing a lot of this stuff till I was older. Like, I'm in a certain scenario, I feel like if I were to go outside in most circumstances, in most areas of the United States at least, I feel like I would have a good grasp on the basics of like how not to die, like not doing incredibly stupid stuff. I just feel like I have a good base understanding because I started from the bottom. Like in my head, there's like this hierarchy of like, you get into the outdoors, you start hiking. You start going around and doing like exploring trails. And then after a while, you go to the same places, you look at the same maps. You're like, okay, this isn't as challenging. So it turns into like backpacking. And then that turns like, you're like, oh, well, I understand this. I through hiked the AT. It's like, this is old hat now. Like, I get it. I understand backpacking. I'm not an expert. I'm not like, if anybody can call themselves an expert in backpacking or anything like that, whatever. And then, okay, that was tough, but I'm going to try kayaking now. I'm going to do long distance. Oh, well, I can go fishing now. Oh, I'm going to try and learn about fishing. Oh, well, that's pretty fun. I caught a lot of fish this year. Oh, well, I'm going to try hunting. And it's like this hierarchy. And I feel like when you get to that level where not only do you have to understand the environment, where you would with like hiking, it's going to rain today. I need to be prepared for a possible hypothermia situation depending on what time of year it is. Oh, it's going to be thunderstorming potentially. Maybe I need to be a little more prepared in that way or stay below tree line or whatever. But then you get into hunting and it's not just you versus quote unquote versus. It's not you and nature. It's you and wildlife, which I don't know how you feel getting into hunting too, because I don't know your whole backstory about hunting, but I know you and I kind of started around the same time, essentially, like getting really into this stuff. And it just feels like there's so much to learn that it can be pretty overwhelming to begin with. Like I'm getting to the point now where I can't say I'm not new anymore. It's been like going on like 6 years now. So but I feel like you can never learn enough. And especially in the areas that like, especially where you live, I mean, those bucks are hard to come by. You got to really know your shit. Like that's like a lifetime of learning to understand that. And around here, I mean, I'm having a hard time. Like this year, I did not get a deer yet. I'm struggling, but I also put a lot of effort into other things.
Sure.
Which is not to say that I don't care about deer hunting. I'm still like chomping at the bit to get out there and do it. But it's like I kind of spent my time focusing on other things. But the main thing I was getting at, I guess, is like where do you draw the line of like realizing that it's just really freaking hard and not everything you see on social media is the actual way it is versus like I'm okay with having to take this time to learn because I'm behind the ball and maybe having to work a little bit harder. Like, where do you toe that line of like, I accept this for what it is and I feel kind of like an idiot for not knowing what everybody else seems to know, like it's this big secret, which it's not, I don't think.
Well, I would say that it kind of boils down to, again, authenticity. And it's like you see these, you're talking about hunting or let's take hunting or fishing or whatever, these shows that exist, right? Because we're in a content-driven world, so there's shows for all of these things. So it's like, you'll see a 5-day hunt in, 30 minutes. And of course, they're always going to get whatever they're out there for at the end of the episode. Otherwise, they're probably not going to be making it into an episode. So it can be very disheartening when you get kind of that sort of thing going in your head, and then you get out there and you're like, wow, I don't ever see anything, or the percentage that I see what I'm out there hunting for is so much lower than I could have ever thought it would be. And I feel like you really quickly learn how hunting actually is. And, the old saying, that's why they call it hunting, not shooting. It's like you learn that pretty quickly, but not everyone. Some people in life are just the types of people that just fall ass backwards into success all the time. It's like, oh, I went out, opening day, my first time, and boom, deer. It's like, wow, screw you, dude. It's like there are people who just kind of have that luck. And that's fine. But, I do feel like anytime once you dive into something, you'll start to realize how it actually is, and that it's not what you see on television. It's not what you see on social media, where it's just like big buck after big buck after big buck. Because why aren't, I say this, I always say like, and I've said this for years, that a really great like documentary film would be a full season with either an Adirondack tracker or like a Maine tracker, a full season going with them for every hunt, every day that they're out, would be a really good documentary film, because I think that that's more of what these sports are. They're the documentary film where you see the ups and the downs and the heartache, and with the happy ending at the end sometimes. not always. Sometimes you'll go the whole season and it just didn't happen. And it wasn't because you didn't put the effort in, it wasn't because you weren't out there. Maybe you had an opportunity or two and you just, you missed it for whatever reason. But like, that is really what it comes down to, eating tag soup. It's like that happens. But then there's also the flip side where sometimes you have these epic days that they end with that happy ending. And it's just like, to see the work that actually goes into it, I think would it's not sexy. It's actually rugged. But that's what the freaking outdoors are. They're not always magical. So sometimes you have to put this crazy work in to get what you want. And you just don't see that in shows because we want the half hour hunt, pretty pictures, pretty mountains, buck down. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what we want. And it's not authentic. It's not really what happens out there. And if you were to say that to anybody, say it to Steve Rinella, who's probably has the most successful hunting show that there is, he'd be the first to tell you, yeah, it's not what we see on the episode. That's not how it really is. I mean, there was one episode they did where it was a 9 or 10 day Alaska hunt, and they didn't ever. I think it was a moose hunt. They never saw one. Mm-hmm. That's a long time to be out there and filming and shooting and like having to turn that into an episode. That is more of what it actually is. Or you see these people. I'll talk about my buddy Todd again. When hunting season starts, he's not working anymore. He's been working where he works for a long time, so he has some. He's been able to make it work, let's say, but he's in the woods from dusk until dawn every single day in the month of November. Every single day, 7 days a week. That's a long time. But you don't know that. You wouldn't know that unless you talked to him and asked him. And it's like, wow, you are just so legitimate and authentic. He goes, I don't know, just like, this is what I'm here for. This is what I live to do. And that's the type of mentality that I like to be around and I like to hear about. But that to me is more of what it is. It's more of, that's the type of effort you have to put in. And again, to bring it full circle, it's like once you start down the path of whatever activity you're doing, you quickly realize it's not so simple. But also like that should kind of drive you to get pretty good at it, and like to want to get to the next level where, I can make it look a little easy sometimes. At least maybe that's a mentality thing. I don't know, but that's how I operate personally. I also think part of the issue with you and I is we just want to do so much and we don't care what we're doing as long as it's outside. So we get ourselves into so many activities and it's just like overwhelming at first because it's just like, there is so much to learn. Maybe I should just pick something. Nah, I like to do lots of different stuff. I like to do lots of different stuff.
Well, the thing is like, also, like, I think a lot of the things that we don't think about is it's so different everywhere, no matter what you're doing hunting-wise. Like for you have this essentially unlimited giant space to wander, which is a whole different ball game from the 10 acres of woods surrounded by cornfields where I have, because I can't wander limitlessly. I'm literally stuck in this area. And the public land around here isn't very vast. I mean, there's a few hundred acres around me, which is whatever. Like it might sound like excuses. I'm just saying the reality of my hunting season this year is I was in the woods where I always hunt. I saw deer. I text you all the time out there, like, I just saw this deer. But one day, deer comes walking up to me. It's already after shooting hours, so I can't legally shoot this animal. So I'm like, okay, well, they're here. And then the next day, he doesn't come at all. And then the next day, he comes 45 minutes before shooting hours are over, but he's 70 yards south of where I can shoot. And it's just like, they aren't these like, it's not this robotic system of like a video game where it's like, oh yeah, everything's stacked in my favor because they're going to try and hook. Like, animals do what they want. Like the last time I sat out here during our Ohio Gun Week, the closing day, not technically, it's closing day of Gun Week bonus weekend. So there's like this weekend after Gun Week where there's a weekend where you can do another gun hunt, 2 extra days. And it was the last day of Gun Week. I had this badass gun I borrowed, 4570 Government from my brother, like just that would knock a deer on its ass. So it's like right before the sunset, this deer comes out of the woods, probably 300 yards away. I'm like, sweet. And it just doesn't walk anywhere near me. Like, can't shoot 300 yards with the iron sights. You know, like there's no way. So it's like this non-static world. And I think that's why people like you and I are so driven to it, is like, it's not easy. It's very complicated. And like, it's like the ultimate game of chess, whereas like, if you breathe wrong, they're gone. Like a ghost, like they're gone. So speaking of hunting, you had a very successful season. How did that go for you, man? I know you got 2 does, correct? And a turkey.
It started off great. It started off magical. And then once rifle season started, it didn't continue.
Descended into chaos.
Yeah, pretty much. But that's all right. No, I was super stoked. I was able to fill both tags. So in New York, you get a doe tag, a either or tag for bow season, a doe tag and an either or tag, and then a buck for buck season or for rifle season. So yeah, it started off awesome. I mean, maybe like a couple weeks in, I was able to get a doe, and then like I don't know. I think it was like a week later I got the second doe. Like it was very quick between the two, and I was just like on top of the world. Everything was so exciting and so good, and So I mean, fortunately, yes, it's a huge success. I have plenty of meat in the freezer. Yeah, I got a turkey as well, which was really exciting. Turkey is exciting, seeing like my daughter like have turkey feathers from the turkey like up in her room, like she wanted them on her wall. Like that's exciting for me. But then rifle season came, and it was just the polar opposites, yin yang. You know, just like could not. I'm like waiting for snow, right? So as I'm really into this whole like big woods tracking thing. I'm really into it. It takes you up the mountains, around the mountains. Like I've tracked deer and been on the tail of deer, like up and down, up and down, up and down and around like the same mountain. Like there's one day where I summited this one mountain 3 times chasing a buck and a doe, just like, you know, playing this game of cat and mouse. Never got a shot, but I saw them, which was, you know, as close as I got. But like, I like that. I like that chase. And then, so for rifle season, like we had a little bit of snow. It didn't snow much, so I didn't get to do nearly the amount of tracking as I would have liked to. And then the days that I was out there, it was like, it would rain that night, and then it'd be freezing. So it was like crunchy leaves. So it's like, it was just nothing was going right after bow season. But, I was still out there adjusting my tactics, lots of sitting. And then days where I could track, I had, my most favorite day I've ever hunted was this season, and I didn't get a deer. I didn't even get eyes on him. I got eyes on a doe that the buck was with, but it was because I was tracking them in just no man's land, in the type of area where it's like, if something happened to me out here, I will never be found. I'm nowhere near any sort of hiking trail. I'm miles back on the backside of this mountain, and there is a hiking trail up that mountain on the other side. Like back here, no one would ever have any reason to ever be out here ever. And that's exciting. To me, I find that just so exciting. So, but that day, I was bumping him out of his bed because the bed was so fresh that when a deer is laying in their bed in the snow and they get up and run, the snow was melted underneath them. So the snow was still melted and it was still snowing, but there wasn't much snow in their bed. So it's like, I know I clearly bumped him. So but that day I was just up and down and around the mountain. And that's what I liked. That's why I enjoy hunting, because I like running around the woods and kind of aimlessly too. You're at the mercy of where they're going, and you take. And then, I have to use my compass to get me back home. So there's some navigation that goes into it too, and following, taking a bearing, knowing okay, once I get out to this area where I'm going to, southeast will take me back to a road, it's 3 or 4 miles away, but I know I just keep traveling southeast. So there is that element too. And it's just that is, to go back to what we were talking about, that's my this one day that is in my head that was just the temperature was perfect too. It was just a magical day out there. That was my favorite day of hunting. And I didn't get a deer. I didn't even get a shot. But that to me is like truly what it's about. It's about the chase. It's about the adventure. You know, I say it all the time, and people think I use that word in my podcast world. People think I sometimes use the word adventure too loosely, but like I don't. I have two middle fingers for you if you don't think that going out in the woods is like an adventure. Like live a little bit, be excited about what you're doing in the woods, and like, oh man, that is adventure. Even if you're hiking up a trail that you've gone up to 1 million times, every day in the woods is different. Yeah. So that's why, like, oh, I love it. But that to me is more of what hunting is actually the hunt, and the adventure that comes with it. So to me, that represents kind of why we do these things that are like they're difficult, they're hard. There's no guarantees whatsoever, but you get those experiences, and that full emotional satisfaction and fulfillment is it's worth its weight in gold, really.
Well, and I think around here especially, I feel like when people say there's nothing to do around here, that just means they're not willing to put in like a minuscule amount of effort to find something. Like
minuscule.
Oh, I didn't want to search on Google for a park I've never been to and go there. Like that, what does that take? 30 seconds at the most?
Yeah.
So, I just gave a presentation about that as well. And I was like, there's so much to do if you're willing to like think outside the box for a few seconds. And there's like, even if you're willing to drive a little bit, there's like limitless opportunities to do stuff all the time. And that's always something I'm pushing too, is like, you're just living in this myth. Like people, like I know a lot of people hear things and they ultimately just accept it and assume that it's true. Whereas I feel like you and I are the opposite. You and I hear things and we're like, I don't necessarily think that I believe that. And we'll just go out of the way to make sure that like we know it's right or wrong. Mm-hmm. And like most of the time, I think things people say are bullshit. Like it's like, no, like you heard this from somebody. Like we've all had like, oh, there's no fish in this lake. You've heard that a million times. Like, no, you just don't know how to fish. That's the problem. Like the root of the problem is you don't know what you're doing.
Sure.
It's not that there are no fish. I've caught plenty of fish in lakes people have said there were no fish in.
There's also like the element too of cockiness that comes with that. Like if I can't get it done, it can't be done. When in reality, it's like, actually, it can absolutely be done. Yeah. You just might need to improve. You might need to get a little better. You might need to do a little more homework, maybe read a book, maybe, talk to some other people, let your pride down a little bit, learn from each other, learn from people who have been out there and been successful. There's so much that can be done. But yeah, I think there's and that, again, it's like this whole image thing. It's like you have to portray that you know everything, when it's like, why would anyone ever want to portray like that they're the expert? Like, there's always more to learn no matter what. It has not, whether you're a guitar player or you're in the outdoors, like there's always more to learn to get better. Mm-hmm. You see these people that you're like, there's this guitar player who plays in this band called Animals as Leaders, and I watch him play and my mind is just absolutely blown. But like every other video of his is like him talking like excitedly about like this new technique he learned. Yep. And how he's been like practicing. Like, if a guy like you is like a perpetual learner, always practicing, like, dude, we should never not be that way. We should always be trying to just learn more. And you can learn. There's always things you can learn. There's something you can learn from someone who's 20 years younger than you. There's something you can learn from someone who's 20 years older than you. There's always new things, and that's when it comes to the outdoors, like especially. I mean, take like you could take hunting. There's so many. How many hunters do you know who started when they were a 12-year-old boy, who their dad took them out and they've been hunting since they were 12? And then how many people do you know who started hunting when they were 40? Probably like the same amount of people. Yeah, probably. So like the 40-year-old can learn something from someone who's 15 years younger than he is because he has something to teach him, and vice versa. So, it's a good mentality to have, and not think you know everything. Like the people who say there's no fish in a lake where there clearly is fish. There's fish everywhere. I don't hear what you have to say. There's fish everywhere.
And I think, like, for instance, yesterday was Christmas. You do the whole family get together and everybody gets their presents. So my family knows that I'm obsessed with old hunting and fishing books. Like, the older, the better, because it's just the knowledge that they had was so hard-earned back then.
Hard-earned, exactly. Hard-earned.
There's no equivalent today of that, because like all these people that are on YouTube and doing this thing and like nailing monster bass, they have hundreds of years of people's knowledge that they got to learn very quickly. And I think I love these old books because they're not talking about like, go buy a live scope and you can look at the bottom of the ocean and, you know, see a fish swimming in real time. It's like, hey, we had to drill 1,000 holes in the ice and we learned from 10 years of screwing that up where the best spots to fish are for these types of fish. And like, to me, that's invaluable. I'm reading a book on pike fishing right now. And like, I didn't know what I didn't even know about pike fishing until I started reading this book. And it's like stuff like that is just like so awesome to me. I got more excited about that than like the badass like fishing hoodie, most high-tech one they make. Somebody got me. It's like the fanciest fishing hoodie of all time. And I was like, I got these books from like the 70s. I'm like, these are sweet as hell. I was so excited about that. And I know we're kind of getting a little long here, but one thing I do want to touch on, I don't think either of us get to talk about it very much because it doesn't really have a lot to do with what we do on our podcasts, is like the element of why fitness is so important, especially for people who are generalists in the outdoors like you and I. And I think it just becomes like, I've noticed this trend of like this whole fitness in the outdoors thing on Instagram and stuff as well. It's like a thing now. It's like a thing. But like, I feel like it's something you and I just inherently do because we know that we enjoy it, and B, we just know that like it makes everything so much easier. And you've kind of went on this crazy journey this year. You've done a whole bunch of crazy different stuff. You've worked out every day for almost a year now. So
almost day 312 today.
Yeah, so you're pushing almost a year of working out every single day, and we get told all these things of like, you know, oh, you need to take a rest day and you need to do this and that. And I think like the human body's meant to move, and we live in this society where it's like people are trying to like make it normalized to be like morbidly obese and stuff. And it's just like, how is that helping anyone anywhere where it's like this mentality of like, why wouldn't you want to be in the best shape you could be in to be able to be successful in anything you want to do outdoors? Because anything you do in the outdoors is a physical activity.
Yeah.
Besides like laying on the beach, I guess. So where does this inherent nature come from you? I know because I do it too, that things have been like, this is something that's been built over years and years and years and years. But where did this come from for you? Because it's just like a trend now, but I've like known you to do this for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, anything in life is easier when you're not breathing heavily. You know, it's like you have to respect yourself enough to make to be going after living the best way that you possibly can and living up to your potential. And you know, with training all these days in a row, like I just made it. You know, I've been training. I mean, I haven't missed a week of training in close to a decade. So like I as far as like my, I guess like exercise life, like I'm pretty old in that regard, but you got to respect yourself. And when you respect yourself enough to say like, well, my health should be important. I mean, for God's sake, like look at this whole COVID nonsense and mess we've been in for the last, 3 years now. And look at what people were mostly affected by it. People who have health problems. So it's like, okay, if you can go through this world in the last 3 years and not say, hey, I need to make my physical health a huge priority in my life. Well, then what the hell are you waiting for? Are you waiting to break your leg first before you decide, maybe I shouldn't jump off this cliff right now? No, it's like you gotta, you know, what's the saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Like people are waiting to be sick before they make changes. And that's a problem. That's a mentality problem that needs to be shifted. But when it comes to the outdoors, when it comes to doing anything, like how much better is climbing mountains when you're not dying when you get to the top? When you're like, all right, on to the next one. Like life is so much better when you get home from a 20-mile hike and you're like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah. What do you want to do? Yeah. As opposed to like crawling back to the trailhead. Like it's so much better when you focus on that, and it doesn't take a lot. And I say to people all the time, like your body is so much stronger than you think it is, and when you commit your mind to it, forget it. It is even stronger than you could have ever imagined. And when it comes to training every day, I'm not saying like I do crazy hard workouts every day. But what I do is I make it a point that every single day, 7 days a week, I am focusing some point of my day. Some days it's 2 hours, some days it's 10 minutes. But there's something every day focused on continuing to improve and spend time focused on my physical health. Because once your physical health is gone, you're not going outside. You're not going into the woods anymore. You're not spending time outdoors. And you're just like your life is going to slowly decline. You have to make it a priority. And it doesn't mean you need to train like a savage 7 days a week like you do when you go to your CrossFit workouts. But it's like, you do need to focus something. And maybe one day it's like, I'm going to go for a brisk, couple mile walk. One day it might be like, I'm going to, hit a 1 rep max on the deadlift. Like there's different elements. And when you choose different each day and you focus on training every day and you switch it up what you do every day, but every day there's something dedicated to pursuing a better life physically for your health. That's when you can train every day. You can do things every day, and you freaking should. Yeah. You should want to live up to your best potential. And like, dude, there are so many people out there who would absolutely kill to be able to walk. They're in a wheelchair. They're disabled for this or that. It's like, you owe it to them too. You owe it to them. You owe it to yourself to not squander like this amazing gift you have of health. Like that's really what we're doing. We're squandering it. Just like, I know you talk about conservation all the time. Like, the outdoors is not to be taken for granted. Like, conservation is such an important factor in the equation today. And it's like, people don't seem to get, like, once you lose it, it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's important to not squander these things, whether it's, it's to tie it in with like the outdoors or your own personal health. You got to focus on doing these things, and you got to focus on you so that you can go do these things and you can do them successfully, and you can enjoy the benefits of getting to the top of a mountain in the winter before the sun rises and experience something that, like, 0.001% of people will ever see this other than just a photo. And we all know photos do not do anything justice. They're not the same. And, that's really what drives me, is like the ability to get places and to go places and see these things that other people aren't going to, simply because they're just choosing not to put in the effort and the work that requires them to get there.
Yep. And that's, I like to do things, and I don't know where this came from, because, like, besides my brother, my family isn't very, like, active, I guess. And it's like, I don't know where this inner drive came from, but, like, I just ran my first 10-mile trail race in, like, the hilliest part of Ohio. And I was
on a whim, let me just pause you right there. On a whim, no less. Like, you just decided to do it. That right there, like, holy crap, dude. I was so impressed when you're like, yeah, I'm just going to go do this 10-mile race. I'm like, 10 miles? Like, what? Yeah. But that comes down, and sorry again to interrupt you, but comes down to, like, you made these decisions that should be just a regular part of your life. And how much better is life when that can be a regular part of your life, because you've gotten to the point where you don't have to worry about a 10-mile race. Sure, I'll go do, you'll go do a 10-mile race. It doesn't have to be like, okay, I'm going to train for a year to do this. No, you just decided on a whim when you did that. And oh man, it gets me fired up too. It gets me so excited that is the way people choose to live. So I commend you.
Well, thanks. But yeah, it's just like, at this point, it's not a matter of, like, knowing that I can or cannot do something. It's a matter of, like, how much am I willing to let it hurt? You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Like, you went out and you did something very similar. You went and did, like, was it a 6 mile something? A race?
Oh yeah, it was just 10K. I had never run more than, like, a couple miles, and I decided to try 10K, which was 6, and it went fine.
Yeah,
just did it.
And I like you said, I am a member of, like, a CrossFit gym. And the thing that is wild to me, the most insane thing, is, like, these people will come to the gym religiously 5-6 days a week. They will do some of the most, like, gritty, disgusting workouts you've ever seen. Like, we're talking, like, 100 burpee box jumps, and, like, then you're going right into, like, heavy, like, cleans or something, say like 150 pound, 155 pound cleans, and then doing like 8-10 muscle ups. And then you're like, hey, you want to go run 3 miles? And they're like, oh, no, that's too much. And it's like, how is this any different? You know what I'm saying? And my mind is just so, I don't know if it's because of that long distance backpacking background I have, but I'm like, 10 miles doesn't seem that intimidating to me. Like the difference between walking and running is like a little drastic, but it's like, well, if it gets too bad, just walk.
You just start walking, yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It's funny because I've mentioned to my wife, this was years ago, I mentioned to her at the end of, so the longest hike I've done to date was just over 26 miles and it was like 9,000 feet of vert. It was a wild day.
Same.
And it was solo too. So it was like just a long day. But after that hike, yeah, I was definitely rocked. I even have a podcast episode about it, but I decided like, I did that 26-mile day with 10,000 feet of vert. I wonder how long you have to do a marathon. I could walk a marathon. That's on pavement. So I actually started researching. But like, you have time limits and stuff with marathons. But at that time, I was like, well, if I could walk, I could hike these mountains. I could go walk a marathon. Sure, why not go do a marathon? But I was actually looking up marathon, rules at that point to give it a try. Because I feel the same way. It's like, go run. And then when you got to walk, just start walking. Just start walking, and then pick it up again, and then walk. Like, yeah. But maybe I got to put my money where my mouth is and go sign up for a marathon now. I think I have to now. I've like called myself out now here on your podcast that I have to do that.
Well, it's funny because you and I just don't think like that. It's like, okay, if I sign up for a marathon, well, I'm just going to do what I need to do to make sure that I can do it, and then that's it. Like there's no reason that you can't squat 400 pounds and still run a marathon. It's all this it's like, again, back to what I said earlier, you hear stuff and then you just take it for gospel. It's like, oh, if you're powerlifting, you shouldn't be able to run 10 miles. And it's like, but people do it all the time.
Why not?
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Why can't you? Your body is like limitless, man. Unless you're severely injured or you have some sort of disability, like your body can put up with a lot. And I've talked about this on a solo podcast I did about the adventure race, but like people talk about the pain cave all the time. And I thought I knew what the pain cave was, but when I did that adventure race, I fully understand what people talk about when they're in the pain cave. And I literally was on this bike section, the mountain bike section, and in the beginning of the race, we're riding down these giant hills, hauling ass on these bikes, and all I can think is, we have to go back up these. And I'm a very realistic person. I'm a realist through and through. I always take everything at like what it is at face value when it's happening. So I knew this going in, and that's very defeating, knowing that's coming at the end of the race. And we're climbing these hills, and my buddies are much stronger riders than me. Like how I work out at the gym is how they ride. Like that's what they do. That's their life. So they were kicking my ass, and I'm riding up these hills. And I said, all you have to do is not stop. And that was like, there's a line I drew in the stand. Like, if you get off this bike, it's fucking over and you're a coward. That's like literally what I was telling myself. And my legs hurt so bad, the most they've ever hurt in their life. And I just refused to get off the bike. I don't care. I like put it in the lowest gear possible, and I just pedaled and pedaled and pedaled. And I was thinking, what's the point of this? If I got off this bike right now, it would not hurt anyone. And we continually passed people who got off the bike, and I was like, just don't get off the bike. And I made it all the way back to the parking lot without getting off the bike, and we won the race because I did not stop then and gave up. And we just like, by the skin of our teeth, we won. And I was like, that's the pain cave. And your body, I think about that so much. Every time I'm like in the gym and I'm like, I don't physically think I could do one more rep. I pick it up and I go for it anyways. Because if you fail, you fail. But I was like, I think there's a barrier there. And once you break that, it's like a whole new world. Like, and I just don't know how you can explain how to get there to someone until they've done it themselves. Because once you break that, you're like, well, I did that. I can do a lot more. Like the 10-mile race was nothing. I was like, I just zoned out, literally. I was running through the woods and I was like, I'm in Salt Fork. I wonder if I could see Bigfoot. That's all I thought the whole time. I'm like, that would be so sweet. But yeah,
there's a mental barrier that you broke through. And it's, I say it all the time to people. It's like when you have a physical transformation, let's say, people don't realize, like, yeah, you're way healthier now physically, but like, you don't see the mental transformation that happened that's inside that person's mind now. They know, I changed my body, I changed my lifestyle. I can change anything. I can do anything. And that's a powerful place to be. And when you do a physical transformation and you actually did the work to make that happen, you're in a whole nother level of life at that point where suddenly challenges, and doesn't have to be physical. It's any challenge is like, okay, I'm ready to tackle it head on because I accomplished this other thing. I didn't quit. I saw it through. And you nothing becomes impossible anymore for you. And like you were talking about, being in the pain cave, you did it, you accomplished it, you didn't quit, you've been there. And every time you do it now, you're going to think back to that first time that you were in it and that you were overcoming, and you're going to remember that you did it once, you can do it again, and then you're going to do it again. And then it's like, oh, next time I'm going to remember, I've done it a couple times. You're going to do it again and then again. And it snowballs, it builds on itself. The mindset that you build when you just refuse to quit.
Yeah.
I could talk on this subject for hours because it gets me so fired up, but people don't typically see the mental mindset transformations that happen. You always see, like, obviously someone looks different physically, and that's great, awesome. But you don't get to see that part of it. But you'll see it when you start to notice their lives, or you start to hear how they speak, or you start to hear about what they're talking about, or things they're accomplishing. And those are the things that get me super psyched. And it all starts with something. So like, for you did that race, and you didn't get off the bike. And now from here on out, you're going to constantly remind yourself, don't get off the bike. And the things that you'll accomplish now because you refused to get off the bike that day, that will snowball and build upon itself, will be tremendous.
Yes.
And I honestly want everyone to be able to experience that. And that comes down to refusing to get off the bike, and refusing to quit.
Well, a lot of this stuff has nothing to do with working out. Like, you can pick any exercise.
Anything.
It's all the same. It doesn't matter. It's all, like, I say this all the time. It's all about the mental work that goes into it. The physical side is just a bonus. You're in better shape. You feel better. But it's all about what's going on in here. Like, oh, I did this exercise a year ago and I only did half the reps. Like, look how far I've come by just showing up every day. That's it.
Yeah.
And then you realize that with life, like, sometimes the podcast is hard. Sometimes I don't want to do it, but I just show up every day and I get it done, whether I have to record an episode by myself or, waking up at 4 a.m. and walking into a frozen field and freezing your ass off is not fun. But I know if I want to get a deer, that's what it takes. And I think once that mindset happens, you just there's times to think and there's times to do. And the times to think are like when you're scouting for a fishing trip. I got ice fishing trips coming up. I'm reading more right now than I've probably read all year because I'm like in that mode, ready to go. But when I'm out there, I'm not going to be referencing the books. I'm going to be doing the activity and just hoping that I learned something and the knowledge is there. I think people overthink the wrong things a lot. And it's like, don't think about running the 10-mile race. Show up at the starting line and go. Don't worry about those. You're going to be out there. There's going to be people around. You're going to be in the mode. You're going to be getting competitive because there's people around you there. But like the training for it, whatever. Run 5 miles, run 6 miles. Like, don't think about it. Just go to the trailhead, get out your car and go. But when you're thinking about exploring in the wintertime, you do need to do a little research. You do need to do a little thinking. So it's like picking where and when to think and when to just shut up and do it.
There's time to do your homework, and there's times to just do it. Just get out and do, and don't get off the bike. And the mindset that you'll build from that will just seep into every element of life, whether it's just like an outdoors activity you're doing, whether it's something at home, at work, relationships, it doesn't matter. Yep. It's all the same, and it all becomes, one within a person. And that's a beautiful thing.
All right. Well, we're getting pretty long-winded here. You and I are both talkers, so we'll talk for a long time. But before we go, I wanted to let people know we have some plans in the air this year. I don't know if you're willing to air them on the podcast as of yet, but I totally am. But I think at a minimum, there's a canoe race up in the Adirondacks that we want to do, all things considered. I know everybody has families and lives and things get complicated. We were supposed to do it this year, but you ended up having a child, which congrats on that.
Thank you
Baby
very much.
3.
It would have been a very bad time to be in a canoe in the backcountry of the Adirondack Park.
Yes.
I can assure you of that.
But I want to let people know you do have an episode about that. I don't know the number or name of it off the top of my head, but there's what's the canoe race called? Because I would like to do it with you. If we can make it happen this coming year, that'd be awesome. If not, we'll do it eventually. But
we're going to do it this year.
It's
going to happen. It's called the 90 miler, the Adirondack Canoe Classic. It's a 90-mile, 3-day canoe. They call it a canoe tour. I mean, like, you can race and like there are prizes for the people who win, but it's more of just like finishing it, the 90 miles in 3 days. Yeah.
There is
all through like just the backcountry, dude. It's pretty wild. The views and the rivers that you go down to are pretty epic.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm prepared. I need to put in some canoe miles because that's not my strongest paddling effort. But I'm excited for that. And then there's a potential we may be doing some secret Bigfoot backcountry stuff if we can make it all come together. So I don't want to spoil that for people, but everybody's well aware at this point that we're Bigfoot fanatics. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking about making maybe something together for a long time, but it doesn't really know if it'll happen this year or not. But we want to do some serious backcountry to build on our fascination with the creature. Yes. But we have different takes on this as well. So it'll be interesting to get us together in the middle of nowhere and see if we can't kill each other.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it'll be a good time, assuming it all happens. Yeah, I mean, there's anything involving outside. You can be sure that Paul or myself will be interested in doing any of it.
Except skiing. I don't like skiing. That's the outdoor activity I found I do not enjoy.
Sure, understood.
But are you working on anything you want to let people know about? And, for the probably 4th time, you could let them know where to find more about 4646 Podcast if they don't know already. But thanks again for coming on, man.
Yeah, I'll always come on your podcast. If you want to listen to, we were talking earlier in the episode about my Winter Hiking 101 series. It's the 46 of 46 podcast. You'll find it anywhere, or 46of46.com. at 46 of 46 podcast on social media. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking to venture outdoors this winter and you want to, you don't want to sit inside all winter and you want to actually like make the winter and the snow be a part of your life and get outdoors, I highly recommend checking out the Winter Hiking 101 series. It has nothing to do with location specifics and all to do with just what you need to have with you, where to, websites to do your homework, what gear to have with you, what to be wearing, different options, what exists, Bet you didn't know there's lots of different puffy jackets, or there's lots of different materials they make base layers out of. And I just go through all of it and just tell you what's out there and give you kind of my hot take on anything based on my own personal experience. So if you're going to venture into the outdoors this winter and, winter recreation is new to you, I highly recommend checking it out. The mountains don't care about you. The outdoors do not care about you. You need to care about them more and do your homework so that you put yourself in the best possible scenario to have a safe and successful venture into the backcountry.
And one last question, since I finally upgraded my podcasting account and I'm a cheap ass. So I finally found out most of my viewers, surprisingly, are from the Midwest. So as a Midwesterner traveling, if you've never been to the Adirondacks, when would you suggest them to come check it out? Like the best time of the year where there's not too many bugs, maybe the crowds aren't too intense, but also like it's doable, because as someone who's been there, it is a magical place. I would highly recommend a trip out there, vacation, something. When's a good off season, but yet still enjoyable time of year for people to come check out the Adirondacks? Maybe underrated.
Yeah, sure. Bugs are happening from let's just say like June to October, November. Every year, any sort of like leaf peeping magazine will say Lake Placid, New York is the place to be, which is where the town that I live in. So like that's obviously fall leaf season. But honestly, it's the busy time, but summer is just, a hot summer day is like 75 degrees. Most summer days are like 70 degrees and sunny. So it's like, summer is just perfect here. And there's a joke about anyone that lives here. It's that like the winters are brutal here. So you have to like make winter a part of your life. Like winter is typically from, October 31st until like May 1st typically. So it's a long winter season, but there's the joke that like, you have to when you're going to move, you have to leave before the summer because the summer sucks you in because it's like, oh, it's perfect. It's flawless. It's just sunny, but like 70 degrees and green in the mountains. And then here comes winter again. It's like, winter, long winter. But the summer to me, it's like, it's the busy time, but that's the time to come here.
Okay.
It's just absolutely gorgeous. And the mountains, thousands of mountains, thousands of lakes. It's just, if you're into the outdoors, which anyone listening to this podcast is, I will say it is a mecca of the outdoors. There is no park in the United States of America that is as big as the Adirondack Park. So that should give you a little, taste of what it is. It is larger than Yellowstone, the Glacier National Park, the Everglades, and the Grand Canyon National Park, and the Smoky Mountain National Parks combined. All of those do not fit or are still smaller than the Adirondack Park combined. So that gives you just an example of how vast this wilderness is. It's pretty radical.
Yes.
And my podcast exists because I want to share it with people. I am the opposite of gatekeeping. I'm here to share it with you all because it's that beautiful. And it's anyone that wants to be in the outdoors, you have my respect, and I'm right there with you.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast. Always a good time of year, or always a good time to talk to you. And I hope more people will listen to your podcast because I really love it as well. So hope you have a great New Year's, man.
Absolutely. You too. And in closing, all of you guys listening to this podcast, Paul is, again, one of the most authentic outdoors lovers that I've ever met in my life. And I live in a place where this is what we do here. We live for the outdoors. And who you have hosting this podcast, I tell you, he is as genuine and authentic as they come. He talks about the outdoors and he can't help but smile. And that is something to be cherished. And listen to his podcast. The man just is obsessed with it. And it is coming from an authentic place. And I just want to commend you again, Paul. I respect you very much.
Thank you, James.